In the far corner of the alien colony, there lived a woman everyone feared. She was taller than most of her kind, with eyes that burned like fire and a voice that could silence even the bravest soldier. Her skin carried the marks of many battles, and her name was spoken in whispers, never out loud. To the colonists, she was the Untamable one. From the moment she was born, she had been different, stronger, faster, more fearless than anyone else. As a child, she wrestled beasts twice her size. As a young warrior, she defied every leader, every law, every chain that tried to bind her. When guards came to control her, she fought them with fury, leaving broken weapons and shattered bones behind. No one could ever make her kneel. The colony built walls around her, not to protect her, but to protect themselves. She would strike, without warning. Farmers who crossed her land vanished. Machines that cut through her forests were torn apart by her hands. She did not ask for power, yet power followed her. Even the bravest hunters stayed away from her shadow. Stories spread like fire about her. They said she once stood alone against a dozen soldiers, ripping their armor apart with her bare hands. They said she could stop a charging beast with a single scream. Some even believed she was cursed, born with a spirit too wild for any tribe, too fierce for any human. And so the name stuck, Untamable. But her fury was not without reason. Deep inside, hidden under her rage, there was pain. She had been betrayed by her own people. She had seen her family torn from her. She had watched humans chain her kind and take them away. Every scar on her body told a story of loss, of survival, of battles fought when no one stood beside her. The colonists did not care about her past. To them, she was only a storm, a danger waiting to strike. They warned every new arrival, every traveler who entered the colony. Never go near her, do not meet her eyes, do not speak her name. To cross her path was to invite death, and yet, despite all warnings, people still watched her from a distance. Children dared each other to peek from the safety of the walls, only to run back in terror when her shadow moved. Traders told tales of her wild beauty, of the way the setting sun painted her figure in gold as she stood on the cliffs, fearless against the winds. Soldiers boasted they could tame her, but none ever returned from the attempt. She lived alone, away from the colony, in the ruins of an old fortress. Nature had claimed it long ago, vines climbing its walls, birds nesting in broken towers. There, she walked like a queen without a crown, her presence commanding respect even from the beasts of the wild. Every night the colony would hear her roar echo across the valley. It was not the cry of a beast, but of a heart filled with fury and sorrow. Some said it was a warning, others believed it was a call for war. Whatever it was, no one dared answer. Then one day everything changed. A new human arrived at the colony. He was not a soldier, not a leader, not a man looking for power. He was just one traveler among many. But when he heard the stories of the Untamable woman, he did not laugh or shiver like the others. He listened carefully, and then he asked the one question no one had ever dared to ask. Where can I find her? The colonists stared at him in disbelief. They told him the same warning they gave to everyone. Stay away, or lose your life. But the man only smiled. There was no fear in his eyes, only a strange curiosity, as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. That night, while the colony locked its gates and prayed for safety, the human walked toward the ruins where the Untamable woman lived. The forest grew darker with every step. Strange sounds filled the air. The ground shook as if warning him to turn back. But he did not stop. He followed the sound of the wind, the echo of her voice, until the old fortress rose before him like a giant shadow. There, under the cold light of the moon, she stood. Her figure was tall and unyielding, her hair flowing like a storm, her eyes glowing with wild fire. The human had found her, the fiercest, most feared woman in the colony, and she saw him too. For the first time in her life, the Untamable one looked at a human who did not tremble, who did not reach for a weapon, who did not run, and though she did not show it, deep inside her heart, a spark of something unfamiliar flickered. something she had not felt in a very long time. The human's name was Daniel, though the colony rarely used it. To them, he was just the outsider, another man who had wandered into their world with nothing but questions. He was not like the soldiers who carried rifles and barked orders. He was not like the traders who bargained for rare minerals and then vanished into the stars. Daniel was quiet. He moved with calm steps and spoke with a soft voice. Yet behind his calmness there was something unusual, an unshakable resolve that made people uneasy. When he first arrived, the colony assumed he would not last long. Outsiders never did. The colony was harsh. Storms tore across the skies. Beasts prowled at night, and mistrust lay thick in the air. Yet Daniel adapted quickly. He learned their language, shared food with the farmers, and listened to the children's stories. He did not force himself into their ways. He simply observed, and in his silence, he earned something rare, curiosity. But curiosity turned into shock when he began asking about her. Most humans avoided even saying her name. The untamable alien woman was a story meant to frighten newcomers, a warning of what the colony's world could do. But Daniel was different. He did not laugh when they called her dangerous, and he did not shrink when they described her fury. Instead, he leaned forward, listening carefully as if every word carried a secret he had been waiting to hear. One evening, while the settlers gathered around their fire, he finally spoke the question aloud. "Where does she live?" The circle went silent. A trader nearly dropped his cup. A farmer spat in the dirt, muttering that death had already chosen him. An elder shook her head and warned him, "She will tear you apart before you can speak." But Daniel only smiled faintly. His eyes held no arrogance, no foolish pride. There was only determination. The colonists thought him mad. They tried to scare him with stories of men who had tried before. Hunters who vanished, soldiers who returned, broken, leaders who begged for mercy. Yet none of it shook him. That night he packed a small bag, carrying nothing more than food, water, and a lantern. No weapon, no shield, no armor. To the colony, it was suicide. To him, it was necessary. The forest at night was a world of shadows. Trees loomed like black towers, and strange eyes watched from the darkness. Every step seemed to echo with unseen movement. The air grew colder, and the silence pressed heavier with each passing mile. Yet Daniel did not turn back. His steps were steady, his heart calm. The path wound upward, leading to the ruins where the untamable woman lived. As he climbed, the sounds of the forest faded, replaced by something deeper, the low hum of the wind through broken stone, the eerie call of a fortress long abandoned. And then he saw her. She stood on the crumbling wall, her figure carved against the moonlight, fierce and unyielding. Her hair whipped like fire in the wind, and her eyes glowed with a light that belonged to no ordinary being. She was everything the stories had promised: wild, dangerous, untouchable. Daniel stopped, not from fear, but from awe. The woman's gaze snapped to him instantly. Her body moved with the speed of a predator, dropping from the wall and landing in front of him with a thundering impact. She was taller than he expected, her presence overwhelming, her expression one of pure rage. "Human," she growled, her voice low and sharp like steel cutting stone. "Why are you here?" Any other man would have fled. Any soldier would have drawn a weapon. But Daniel did neither. He lowered his lantern, letting its faint glow reveal his calm face. "I came to see you," he said simply. Her eyes narrowed. "To tame me? To chain me like the others?" Daniel shook his head. "No, to understand." For a moment there was silence, broken only by the howl of the wind. Her muscles tightened, ready to strike. But his words lingered in her ears. Understand. No one had ever used that word with her before. Still, fury burned in her heart. She lunged forward, faster than the eye could follow, grabbing him by the collar and lifting him into the air. Her strength was terrifying, her grip like iron. She could have ended him in a breath. Yet Daniel's face remained calm. His eyes met hers without fear. If you are going to kill me, he said softly, do it while looking in my eyes. See if I am like the others who hurt you. The words froze her. The fire in her chest clashed with something deeper, something she had buried long ago. For the first time her hand trembled. She threw him to the ground, but she did not finish him. Instead, she stepped back, her breathing heavy, her eyes filled with confusion. This human was not what she expected. He did not beg, did not fight, did not even hate her. Daniel rose slowly, brushing the dirt from his clothes. He did not smile, did not boast. He only said, I will return tomorrow. And with that, he walked back into the darkness, leaving her staring after him in silence. For years she had been untamable. For years no one had dared face her without fear. But now, a single human stranger had stood before her, unarmed, unbroken, and unafraid. And though she would not admit it, deep inside her heart a dangerous thought had begun to stir. What if this man was different? The next morning, the colony watched from a distance as Daniel walked back toward the ruins. Whispers followed him, voices filled with disbelief. No one had expected him to survive the night. Yet here he was, alive and calm, carrying nothing more than bread, dried fruit, and a lantern. The elders shook their heads. The soldiers mocked him. But deep inside, some were unsettled. If the untamable woman had spared him once, what did it mean? The path to the fortress was even harsher in daylight. Vines clung to shattered walls. Strange, birds circled above, and broken stone glistened under the sun like the bones of a giant beast. At the heart of it all, she waited. The alien woman stood barefoot among the ruins, her sharp features shadowed by the morning light. Her eyes glowed, with suspicion, her posture ready to strike. She had thought the human would not return, but now he had, and that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Daniel stopped a few steps away and placed the food gently on the ground. I brought this, he said. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Do you think I need your offerings, human? Daniel shook his head. Not offerings, a gesture. Her laugh was cold, almost bitter. Gestures are lies, promises that break, chains in disguise. She circled him slowly, her presence heavy, her steps deliberate. Do you know how many humans have come here before you? Hunters, soldiers, leaders, all claimed they were different. And every one of them tried to bind me. Daniel stood still, his eyes following her without fear. I am not here to bind you. The woman's face hardened. With sudden speed she moved forward, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. The force was brutal, enough to make any man scream. Yet Daniel only winced. He did not beg. She pressed him against the cold wall of the fortress. Her voice was low, filled with venom. Then why are you here? Why do you stand in front of me when you know I could crush you in a breath? Daniel's voice came steady, even with her strength holding him down. Because I see someone who has carried too much alone. The words struck deeper than any weapon. For a heartbeat, her grip faltered. Memories flashed, chains on her wrists, betrayal in her people's eyes, the laughter of humans who once called her weak. She tightened her hold again, as if crushing the past itself. You know nothing of me, she hissed. Then show me, Daniel replied. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the wind through broken stone. She could not understand him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had dared ask her to reveal anything but her rage. Fury surged again. She released his arm and shoved him to the ground. Her eyes blazed as she raised her hand, claws, extending, ready to strike. For a moment, the colony's warnings echoed true. This was where Daniel would die. But then she froze. Daniel lay on the ground, but he did not shield himself, did not crawl away. His gaze held hers, calm and unyielding. If this is what you need to do, he said quietly, then do it. But if you let me live, I will come back again, and again, until you know I mean what I say. Her hand trembled. She could not understand, why her body refused to move. Every instinct screamed to finish him, yet her heart whispered something else, something dangerous. With a snarl, she lowered her hand and turned away. "Leave," she ordered. Daniel rose slowly, dusting himself off. He did not thank her, he did not smile, he only said, "Tomorrow." She spun back toward him, her eyes blazing. "Tomorrow. You dare," but he was already walking into the forest, his steps steady, his shoulders unshaken. For the rest of the day, the woman prowled the ruins like a beast trapped in her own cage. His words lingered in her ears, clawing at her mind. Why had she let him go? Why did his calm voice disturb the storms within her? That night, when her roar echoed across the valley, it was louder, sharper, filled with something she had never felt before. It was not just fury, it was confusion. And for the first time in years, she found herself waiting. Not for a fight, not for a hunt, but for the sound of footsteps returning to her ruins. The third day came, and just like he had promised, Daniel returned. The colony shook their heads in disbelief. Some muttered that the man was cursed, others swore he would not come back alive this time. Yet still, he walked the same path into the forest, calm as ever, his steps steady as though he was walking toward a friend rather than a storm. At the ruins, she waited. Her eyes narrowed when she saw him. She had expected fear, hesitation, some sign of weakness. Instead, he brought bread again, setting it gently on a flat stone, as though placing an offering to the gods. "Still alive," she said coldly. "Perhaps your kind is harder to kill than I thought." Daniel smiled faintly. "Or perhaps you chose not to kill me." Her jaw tightened. "Do not mistake my mercy for weakness, human." Daniel nodded. "I don't." The simple reply unsettled her. Others always begged or trembled, but he gave no reaction except quiet respect. She circled him again, testing, watching for cracks in his calmness. But he did not flinch. Days turned into weeks, and every day Daniel came back. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he simply sat nearby saying nothing. At first she ignored him. She thought his patience would break, that one day he would give up and vanish like the others. But he never did. Slowly, her rage began to shift into curiosity. She found herself asking questions she had buried long ago. Why does he come? What does he want? Why does he not fear me? One morning when he arrived, she finally spoke. Her voice was sharp, but less hostile than before. "Why do you return? You bring no weapon, no army, no chains. What is it you seek?" Daniel looked at her calmly. "To know who you are, not the stories, not the whispers. You." Her chest tightened. For years, people had called her untamable, beast, monster. No one had asked her name. No one had asked her story. "Names mean nothing," she said bitterly. "They are only shackles given by others." "Then tell me what you call yourself," Daniel replied. The question struck deep. She had almost forgotten her true name. It had been buried beneath layers of anger and pain. For a long moment she stood silent, staring at him. Then she whispered it, so quietly it was almost lost to the wind. "Solara." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Solara." He spoke it as though it were sacred. No mockery, no fear, only respect. Something shifted inside her then. For the first time in years she felt seen, not as a monster, not as a danger, but as herself. That evening, when Daniel rose to leave, she did not tell him to go. Instead, she watched him walk into the forest, her chest heavy with feelings she could not explain. Over the next days, their fragile bond grew. She tested him constantly, throwing stones near his head, roaring in his face, snapping branches to startle him. But Daniel never reacted with fear or anger. He stood steady, his calmness like a mirror reflecting back her storm. One night, as they sat by a fire in the ruins, Solara finally spoke of her past. "They betrayed me," she said, her voice low and rough. My own kind. And yours. They called me dangerous. They chained me. They took everything I loved. That is why I will never be tamed. Daniel did not interrupt. He listened, his eyes steady, his silence filled with understanding. When she finished, he simply said, "No one should endure that alone." The words cut deeper than chains. She turned away, her throat tight, her heart raging against emotions she thought were long dead. Anger was easy. Fury was safe. But his presence pulled at something buried, something fragile, something human. The next morning, when Daniel prepared to leave, she surprised herself. She asked, "Will you return?" He smiled faintly. "Always." And for the first time in many years, the fiercest woman in the colony allowed herself a thought she had once sworn impossible, that maybe, just maybe, she was not untamable after all. The fire burned low inside the ruins, casting flickering shadows across the broken walls. Solara sat with her knees drawn close, her sharp gaze fixed on the flames. Daniel sat across from her, silent as always, waiting. He had learned not to force words from her. She spoke only when she chose, and tonight, for the first time, she seemed ready. Her voice was rough when it came, carrying years of weight. "You asked who I am. You want to know the truth. Very well, then listen, human." Daniel's eyes stayed steady, his hands resting calmly on his knees. "I was not always the untamable one," she began. "Once I was a daughter, a sister, a protector of my people. I was proud of who I was. My tribe lived beyond these forests, near the mountains where the air was clear and the rivers sang. We were free." Her eyes hardened, her tone colder. "But freedom does not last. Your kind came first. Soldiers with weapons that spat fire. They wanted the land. They wanted slaves. They called it protection. They chained us in the name of peace." Daniel listened quietly. His jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Solara's fists clenched at her sides. "We fought back. I fought harder than most. And for a while I believed we could win. Until my own people betrayed me. Leaders who feared my strength. Leaders who thought I was too wild, too dangerous even for them. They handed me to the humans, hoping the chain around my neck would silence me forever." She bared her wrist, scarred where iron had once dug into her skin. The mark was deep, old, but it carried a story stronger than any words. "They tried to tame me," she spat. "Cages, whips, poison in my food. They said no beast could resist long. But I am not a beast. I broke their chains, I tore down their camps, and I swore that never again would anyone hold me." Her eyes blazed as she looked at Daniel. "So, I became what they feared, untamable, wild. I let rage guide me because rage was all that kept me alive." The fire cracked loudly, filling the silence that followed. Daniel's gaze stayed locked with hers, steady, unwavering. Finally he spoke. "And in all this time, no one stood with you?" Her laugh was bitter, almost broken. "Stand with me? They ran from me. My kind cursed my name. Your kind hunted me. Alone was the only way I knew how to survive." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Then you are stronger than anyone I've ever met." The words caught her off guard. She had expected pity, or fear, or condemnation. Instead, he gave her respect. Her chest tightened, her heart beating harder than she wished. "You do not understand," she said, though her voice wavered. "This strength is a curse. I am feared, hated, and alone because of it. No one can look at me without seeing a monster." Daniel's reply was soft, but it struck deep. "I don't see a monster. I see someone who has carried pain no one should carry alone." Solara turned away, staring into the flames. She did not want him to see the storm behind her eyes. Yet, she could not ignore the truth. His words pierced through walls she had built for years. The silence stretched long, but it was not uncomfortable. Daniel did not push her. He let the fire speak, the crackle of wood filling the air. At last, she whispered almost too quietly to hear, "Why do you not fear me?" Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Because you have already spared me more times than you admit. If you truly wanted me dead, I would not be here. That tells me you are more than the rage they named you. For her breath caught. She wanted to argue, to shout, to push him away. But the truth burned in her chest. He was right. Something inside her had stopped her hand each time, something she could not explain. For years, Solara had roared into the night, believing no one would ever hear her. But tonight, for the first time, someone had. She looked at Daniel then, truly looked. And the firelight showed her something dangerous. Trust. Small, fragile, but real. Solara's voice was low, heavy with exhaustion. Do not betray me, human. If you do, I will not forgive. Daniel nodded. Then I will not. The words hung between them like a promise carved in stone. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Solara felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The night was colder than usual, and the valley carried a silence that felt wrong. Solara stood at the highest wall of the ruined fortress, her eyes fixed on the distant lights of the colony. Something stirred in the air, an unease that even the beasts of the forest seemed to sense. Birds fled into the night, their wings beating frantically, while the ground trembled with a rhythm too steady to be natural. Daniel arrived as he always did, lantern in hand, but his calm expression carried a shadow of concern. Something's coming, he said. Solara's sharp eyes narrowed. Raiders, she muttered. I have heard their drums before. They take what they want. Food, lives, slaves. And the colony cannot withstand them. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we must stand with them. She gave him a hard look. We? Yes, Daniel said simply. You and me. Solara almost laughed. For years she had lived with nothing but betrayal. The colony feared her, hated her, even cursed her name. And yet here was this human, asking her to fight for them. For people who would never thank her, who would rather see her locked away. Her chest burned with conflict. Why should I fight for those who call me a monster? Daniel met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Because you are not the monster they think you are more. And if you fight, they will see it too. The words clawed at her heart, dangerous and tempting. She turned away, growling low in her throat. But deep inside, she knew. Daniel was right. Before she could answer, the sound came. A deep rolling thunder of drums and engines. Fire flared on the horizon as raiders rode into the valley, their weapons flashing, their war cries tearing through the night. The colony bells rang, out in panic. Solara's fists clenched. Memories of chains and betrayal rushed back, but so did the memory of Daniel's calm voice. For the first time, she faced a choice that mattered. Turn away or stand. She looked at Daniel, and in his eyes she saw no fear, only trust. That was enough. With a roar that shook the ruins, Solara leapt from the wall. Her feet struck the ground with force that split the stone beneath her. Her voice rose into the night, a battle cry so fierce that even the raiders hesitated for a heartbeat. Daniel followed, not with the strength of a warrior, but with courage that glowed brighter than any weapon. Together, they ran toward the colony. The first clash was brutal. Raiders stormed the gates, tearing down defenses with machines built for war. The colonists scattered, screaming, unprepared for the violence. But then Solara struck. She tore through the front lines like a storm unleashed, her claws ripping through metal, her roar scattering soldiers. For years the colony had whispered of her fury. Tonight, they saw it with their own eyes. But instead of turning against them, her rage turned against their enemies. Daniel fought differently. He moved with quick precision, pulling the wounded to safety, guiding colonists into cover, shouting orders that carried calm in chaos. He had no claws, no monstrous strength, but his courage inspired those around him. People who once mocked him now followed his lead. Together, they became a force the raiders could not predict. Solara's raw power and Daniel's steady mind. Where she struck, he directed. Where he faltered, she shielded. And yet the battle was far from easy. Raiders surged like waves, machines grinding through the gates. Fire spread across homes, the air thick with smoke. Solara fought until her arms ached, until blood ran down her skin. But even when exhaustion threatened to claim her, Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. "Solara, with me." She turned, and for the first time in years, she did not fight alone. They drove the raiders, back step by step, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. By dawn, the valley lay littered with broken machines, and the raiders fled into the mountains, their drums silenced. The colony was scarred, but alive, and all eyes turned toward the ruins where Solara stood, her chest heaving, her figure fierce against the rising sun. They had feared her for so long, but now they saw her as something else: protector, warrior, ally. Solara looked at Daniel, her throat tight with words she could not yet speak. She had chosen to stand with him, and in doing so, she had changed. Not just her fate, but the fate of everyone who once cursed her name. For the first time, she wondered if she was no longer the untamable one. The dawn broke gently over the valley, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson. Smoke still drifted from the colony, curling upward like the last whispers of a nightmare. The people moved slowly through the ruins of their homes, repairing, walls tending to the wounded, searching for what could still be saved. And at the center of it all stood Solara. Her figure was fierce yet calm, her body marked with fresh scars and streaks of blood that was not all her own. For years the colonists had seen her only as a shadow, a storm waiting to strike them. But now they looked at her differently. They saw the woman who had fought through the night, who had torn through machines that would have slaughtered them all. She had stood where no one else could, and the colony still lived because of it. Whispers rose among them. Protector. Savior. Not a monster. Solara felt their eyes on her and for the first time did not feel rage. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar: acceptance. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Daniel stood beside her, exhausted yet steady. His lantern was long gone, his clothes torn, but his calmness never wavered. He looked at the people, then at her, and said quietly, "They see you now." Her throat tightened. "They see a weapon." "No," Daniel replied. "They see the truth." Solara turned to face him, her sharp eyes narrowing as if to study him. For so long, trust had been a danger to her. But Daniel had stood with her, bled with her, and never once turned away. In his presence, the walls she had built over years of pain had begun to fall. The elders of the colony approached, their faces uncertain. One of them, a woman with silver hair, bowed her head slightly. "We owe you our lives," she said softly. "The raiders would have destroyed us without you." Solara's voice was low, careful. "And yet you once cursed me." The elder swallowed. "Perhaps we judged too quickly. Perhaps we saw only what we feared." The words stirred something, deep inside Solara. For years she had longed for recognition, for someone to look at her and see more than rage. Now, it was finally happening. Still, she gave no answer. Instead, she turned to Daniel. Her eyes carried a question she could not yet speak. He answered with a faint smile. "You don't have to forgive them now. Just know that today changed everything." That night, when the fires of the colony burned low, Daniel and Solara walked together along the edge of the forest. The stars shimmered above, bright and endless, as though the universe itself was watching. "You fought like no other," Daniel said. Solara's voice was quiet, almost uncertain. "I fought because you stood with me." He stopped, turning to face her. "No, you fought because you are more than the name they gave you. You are not untamable. You are unstoppable." For the first time in years, a small, almost unnoticeable smile touched her lips. It was not the smile of victory, but of release, of letting go of chains that had bound her heart. "Daniel," she said softly, speaking his name with a weight that made it sacred. "If you ever betray me, I won't," he answered, cutting her words gently, his voice steady as stone. The silence that followed was not heavy like before. It was warm, filled with the quiet strength of two souls who had chosen to trust each other. The next days changed everything. The colony no longer locked their gates against her. Children no longer ran from her shadow. Instead, they watched her, with awe, some even daring to step closer. And when they saw Daniel at her side, they whispered not with fear, but with hope. Solara had not become tame. She had not bowed, had not surrendered who she was. Instead, she had become something greater. And in choosing to stand with Daniel, she had gained what she thought impossible, a place where she belonged. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel and Solara stood at the ruins where their bond had begun. The fortress was still broken, but no longer empty. Now it felt alive, filled with the promise of something new. Solara's voice was low, almost hesitant. What happens now? Daniel looked at the horizon, then at her. Now we build. Together. She studied him for a long moment, her fierce eyes softer than ever before. Then she nodded. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. And so, the fiercest, untamable woman in the colony walked beside the human who had taken her in. Not as monster and man, not as captor and captive, but as equals, bound not by chains, but by trust. The colony would remember her roar. The raiders would remember her fury. But Daniel would remember something greater, the moment when the wild storm chose not destruction, but hope. And under the endless sky, their new bond began.